Hi folks, Mr. Oleson here. Thanks for tuning in to this lecture on Chapter 5 from Strayer 4th edition. We are starting a new unit and a new period today. We are studying the early modern period. So this covers all of world history from 1450 to 1750. It's called the early modern period because in some ways it's increasingly modern. In other ways, all those old patterns of civilizations that we've been analyzing from 1200 to 1450 are going to persist. So first thing I want you to do is pause the video and brainstorm on your own after reading about this in Strayer, or if you want to, you can turn to a neighbor and talk about it if that works for you. In what ways is this period modern, and in which ways did old patterns continue? Go ahead and pause the video and play when you're ready. And welcome back. So a few things that may have came to mind. In what ways is this period modern? Okay, one thing that stands out is that European societies are increasingly at the forefront of world history in this period. And one of the things that defines the modern world, in some ways for the worse, in some ways for the better, is that the Europeans are at the center of it. That process is going to start in the early modern period here. This is also the first truly global period in all of world history. Why is that? Because the Americas are finally brought into that system. Last unit from 1200 to 1450, it was all about the IoT, the Silk Road, the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. So lots of interregional trade, but it only existed in Afro-Eurasia, right? And what's happening here just after 1450 is the Americas are being brought into the truly global interregional trade, intercultural exchange world, okay? So on the one hand, this is increasingly looking like the modern world. On the other hand, lots of old patterns continue, right? So unfortunately, social inequalities, the concept of slavery and having enslaved human beings, patriarchy, the fact that land-owning elites are dominating, most folks are poor agricultural peasants, all of those things are going to persist. Indeed, one of the reasons this period stops at 1750 is because that's right before the Industrial Revolution, right? So these are still agricultural societies. There's no industrial production. So in that ways, there's a lot of continuity economically from 1200 to 1450. Okay, so those are a few things to think about as we define this period. One of the most interesting things that's happening right here at 1450, in the beginning of this period, is some change in who's powerful. So one thing I want you to pause and think about for a second is, why are some societies more powerful than others? And you can think about this in the most broad sense possible. It doesn't have to be specific to world history. I just kind of want you to start brainstorming. What makes societies more powerful, and why are some societies more powerful than others? Okay. What might come to mind, and often students will bring up a variety of ideas. One that usually comes up is geography. So a famous intellectual from UCLA named Jared Diamond argues it's all about geography. So in his famous book and later National Geographic series, he argues, which is called Guns, Germs, and Steel, he argues it's all about geography, right? So the luck of any one group of human beings in terms of where they are geographically located and the resources that they have to extract around them sets the stage for the power dynamics in world history, okay? And so that kind of explains a lot, right? And you might think about the geographical luck of the Middle East, right? And how, because they were at the heart of all those trade networks, the Abbasid Caliphate was able to thrive for a long time, right? But it's probably more than geography, right? Because if power centers change over time, then it's not just geography, right? Because Song China and the Mongols were thriving and dominating from 1200 to 1450, and now their power is going to wane as the Europeans rise to take over on the global stage, right? So if it was just geography, we wouldn't see those changes. So something else is happening here. And this is where Ian Morris comes in. So Ian Morris is a historian at Stanford, and he builds off of Diamond's thesis. And he says, yes, I agree with Jared Diamond. Geography definitely shapes the development of societies and therefore how powerful they are. However, development changes the meaning of geography. In other words, the more advanced and the more technologically advanced societies become, then the meaning of any given geography is going to change. Okay, and this is so relevant. This thesis is so relevant for what we're talking about here because of the rise, the beginning of the rise in Europe after 1450. So for most of world history, all the action was over here in Afro-Eurasia, and technological advancements made it so the Middle East, China, India were able to kind of thrive and have all these geographic advantages from the trade networks we've talked about so far. And Europe was out here kind of in the doldrums of the Dark Ages, way out here on the outskirts of where all the interaction was, all the cultural exchange was, all the economic activity was. Right? However, as sailing technology in this period gets advanced enough where we can go out across the Atlantic and bring the Americas into the system, then all of a sudden the meaning of Europe's geography changes, right? And instead of being out here on the outskirts of the Afro-Eurasian systems, Europe is at the center of the Atlantic system once ocean-going technology becomes advanced enough to bring the Americas into the global system. So it's just one little example of how, yes, geography matters, but the meaning of geography changes as technology changes. Okay, so I would encourage you to think about that as we look at this shift in world history in this period. So as we zoom a little bit more into chapter 5, one of the things that Schreyer talks about is what does give Europe an advantage in this period, in the early modern period. I already talked a little bit about their geography. They also kind of have the need to expand, right? Europe had been a relatively backward civilization through from 1200, 1450, and especially before, right? So as a marginal society, they were more assertive in looking for ways to get access to those riches of the East. And because they've been marginal, they kind of have a more up and coming attitude than the existing superpowers had coming into 1450. Within Europe itself, there's lots of rivalries among states. And you know this from your own experience, whether it's in sports, whether it's with a sibling, whether it's in performing arts. If you have some rivals that you're competing with, oftentimes it makes both sides better, right? And European states are rivaling and competing with each other, and that's going to contribute to their expansion in this period. The role of merchants in European society is relatively strong. They are have more independence from the state, which is going to allow them to do more creative things with joint stock companies as part of European colonialism in this period. Okay. The religious zeal of Europeans gives them an exploration advantage in the early modern period. They're coming off of the Crusades, the crusading attitude, especially of the Portuguese and the Spanish, continues as they move into the Americas. And then once the American colonies start, by first the Spanish and the British, the Spanish and the Portuguese, and then later the Dutch and the French and the British, the help from American collaborators are going to help, right? We'll talk about this more next class, but the Aztec Empire, for example, was a large, abusive military empire, right? Who was ruling over and abusing different peoples. So when those peoples who were being abused by the Aztecs see the Spanish come, they are willing to help the Spanish because they think they're going to be freed from the Aztec Empire. Of course, the great irony there is that the Spanish were in many ways more brutal than the Aztecs, but you can see how that contributed to Spanish conquest. Okay, what you see as a result of European exploration into the Americas, right, and Columbus stumbling upon the Americas in 1492 is a demographic collapse of Native American societies. Before, in the pre-Columbian Americas, in other words, before Columbus, there was a population probably of 60 to 80 million people. 90% of them are going to pass away because of European diseases. Okay, and the empire building violence of the Spanish and the Portuguese and others led to a lot of atrocities, but the deaths that occurred from those pale in comparison to the death from disease. And of course, why are so many Native Americans going to die? It's because they've been isolated for thousands of years from Afro-Eurasian diseases. So European and African diseases are going to wipe them out. And not only are folks suffering from the Great Dying, but you're going to get more suffering from the Little Ice Age. So in the early modern period, we experienced the Little Ice Age. It peaks in the 1600s, also known as the 17th century, and it's going to get a little bit colder all over the world. And this wreaks havoc on crops. In the Caribbean, it makes rains more common. In other areas, it makes droughts more common. And it's going to lead to even more challenges in the Americas and actually all over the world, in what Strayer coins the general crisis. So lots of challenges here in the early modern period once the Americas are brought in to the world system through European empires, okay? The exchange of peoples and crops and animals and ideas from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas in this period is known as the Columbian Exchange. And we'll deal with this a lot more next class, but just as a little bit of an intro, the Native Americans dying off because of that Great Dying creates a huge labor shortage in the Americas. So it's going to lead to the Atlantic slave trade, which is the massive expansion of slavery that we had seen in world history for a long time. A lot of really important food crops from the Americas, like potatoes and corn, are going to head to Afro-Eurasia. A lot of American stimulants are going to head to Afro-Eurasia, especially tobacco and chocolate, and a lot of European foods and domesticated animals and diseases and ideas are also going to come over to the Americas. So this is a huge development in terms of interaction with the environment, and lots and lots of cultural and economic exchange. And when we get together next class, I want you to be prepared to think about and give me specific examples of which people, crops, animals, diseases are going from Afro-Eurasia to the New World, which is the Americas, and also from the Americas to Afro-Eurasia. So we'll kind of pick up with this topic when we meet again for next class. Hopefully this intro was helpful for you, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.